Well, welcome back to the channel. In this video it's going to be another full engine. This is a quick top and tail of a customer's 2-litre Duratec. My customer I think found us through YouTube, been watching the YouTube channel, so got in touch and asked if we'd rebuild this engine for him but for his sister's car. So he brought it down. He also bought a box full of goodies down there, which is things like we've got a pair of cams, there's main and big end bearings, some ARP rod bolts. In fact, I'll show you. There's a new fuel rail with injector. Oh no, it's not new, so we'll test these injectors. There's ACL race bearings, mains and big ends at standard, so we've got to make sure the crank's good. There's also ARP rod bolts, ARP flywheel bolts. Oh, there's loads of gear in it. Oh, there's a brand new set of pistons, standard pistons and rods. Heavy duty clutch, oil filter, spark plugs, timing chain kit, vernier pulley, yeah, and just some other bits and bobs. So I'm going to dismantle this engine, or tear down, whatever you want to call it. Go through any damage that it's got and any repairs that it needs, and yeah, let's see what's wrong with it and see what we can make it look like. It doesn't look too great at the moment, I must admit. It's very, very oily. I don't know what we're going to do about the rocker cover. It looks like someone's had a go at painting it white at some stage. So yeah, it's looking a little bit worse for wear at the moment, but I'm sure we can get it stripped and make it look pretty again, and also make it where it works. There's his box of bits, and there's his cams. So let's get it stripped. So that's the 2-litre Duratec now stripped, apart from removing the pistons. It's in good condition actually. The crank has been already ground to 0.25 on the mains and 0.25 on the big ends. There's a slight bit of wear on the bore, and you can see in the combustion chamber that it's been using a little bit of oil. Just get these out, make sure we haven't got a broken ring somewhere, which we haven't, although those rings was lined up. The oil control rings look a little bit worn. So what I'm going to do with this now is give my customer a call and tell him what we've found, and see exactly what plan of attack he wants to go in reconditioning his engine. But yeah, it's far from a bad engine, but it's definitely been using some oil. If I show you the cylinder head, especially on that number 1 cylinder. I mean, the oil's black in it. Like I say, the bearings are in good condition, but it has been ground to 0.25. So I'm going to get hold of my customer, see exactly what he wants to do, and I'll keep filming and show you what we're going to do to repair it for him. So Mark's Duratec block, we've shelved that because after having a measure up, the block is at 0.25, the crank is at 0.25, but actually quite big on the bore. So his friend has just dropped off another donor bottom end, which is here. So we're going to get that stripped hopefully later this afternoon and get it in the wash. But it looks standard at the moment. The bore definitely measures up to be standard. So we just need to check the crank and then we'll continue the machining and building. So I'm still on with Mark's and I'm at the minute cleaning the cylinder head. So I thought this is the perfect opportunity to show you that we've now bought a big ultrasonic tank. So we're going to have a look at Mark's head before. You see it's in a right mess, all carboned up really bad. So let's just see what an hour in here does. So let's see what Mark's cylinder head looks like. First time using the ultrasonic for me. Sam's been using it a little bit.
Yeah, it's done a good job actually. It's removed all the dirt. That's really good. It's got this separate little wash gun with it as well. So we can give it a good rinse off. Oh yeah, look, the combustion chamber's absolutely immaculate. Right, so the next thing for me to do on this is to take the valves and the spark plugs out of it and recondition the cylinder head. Give it a skim. It's cleaned all the carbon out of the ports. It's done a brilliant job. Oh, I'm actually really impressed with that. We've stuck that carburettor in there as well. So I'm going to go and rinse these bits off now and then we'll get the Duratec stripped. But yeah, first go with the ultrasonic and I'm impressed with it. So happy with that. Goodbye.
So I've just stripped Mark's second engine down, and good news is everything's completely standard and the crank's actually in really good condition. So that don't need grinding or anything. But yeah, it's all completely standard. So I'm just gonna clean up all these gasket faces and prep it ready to stick in our ultrasonic tank, which will hopefully clean all this up because it's not pretty. So I've got the block, the cradle and the crank in there. So I'll just lower this down. That'll probably soak in there for 45 minutes to an hour. And that should clear off a lot of the oil and get it back to a nice casting so we can get some measurements off it. Right, see how it looks. I was planning on only having this in here for about 45 minutes or so, but we carried on doing some other engine work and we've ended up standing there for, I think it's been about 2 hours now. Yeah, it's looking much better. It's a lot better than what it was. Just want to turn it over, I think. Where this cradle was in there upside down, I'm guessing it had all big air pockets in here because you can see the colour of what the alley was before. So I'll put that back in, but that way round. But I think the block, I mean I could turn the block over a different angle, but oh yeah, loads better. I mean, you'll see on the video how it looked before. Yeah, I'll turn that around and put that back in, because you can see in them corners where it's obviously had pockets of air trapped in there and the fluid's not been able to get up in there. But that crank can come out now. I'll put the crank in the big hot wash now, just to give it a good rinse off. But these two bits I'm going to probably put back in for another 20 minutes or so. But yeah, a lot better. So the crank's just had 15 minutes in the hot parts wash. So that's got it completely back to casting now. So I'm just going to give that a little spray off quickly just to stop it going rusty. That's looking much better now. And then the block and the cradle. So that's had another 15 minutes, and I've just put it in upside down just to get any bits that was missed before when it was facing the right way up. Some of these areas, like in there, that would have just been a big air pocket in there, and all up here, so that's brought that back. Looking much better now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this out. I'll put it on the shelf for tonight so it can have overnight to cool down, and then in the morning I'll bolt the cradle back onto the engine so we can measure the main housing, because these alley blocks, these like to move quite a bit, and I'm not sure if this is going ARP or not, but the ARP, if it is ARP stud and nut, it likes to squash down just over a foul more than what I do if it had standard bolts in. So if it is having ARP, we'll put the cradle back on, torque it all up to spec, and then we'll have to line home this as well. But I'm not actually sure what bolts are going in this. But yeah, I'll take it out now. It can cool down overnight, and then we can measure the bores and then see where we're going with it. Hopefully it'll just be the case of giving it a light hone, and then just cleaning up all these gasket faces. But yeah, it's looking a lot better than what it did.
So I'm on the Duratec and I am just deglazing the bores. It's going standard bore with a new set of rings, new pistons and new conrods. So all I'm doing here is just nibbing them up basically. I'm gonna just run the course through it first just to get my valleys right, and then I'm putting the smooth in it to knock the peaks off. So that's Mark's block now honed. So I'm going to clean the gasket faces up, clean the head face up. So Mark's Duratec is all painted, and I'm going to bolt it onto the stand now. Sam got all this painted yesterday for me, so it's looking looks really nice actually. So we're going to get that onto the stand. I've got to balance the crank assembly, and then it's going back together for him. So what we'll do now is quickly balance the assembly. So the sump's been through the wash to remove all the oil and grime off it, but it's quite tarnished in places, so I'm going to put this in the shot blaster. There's nothing in there that I can't get to with the blow jet, so I'm safe doing that. I think it will just tidy it all up, and I've got a shot blast the backs of his valves anyway, so I might as well just try and knock some of this bad corrosion off the sump. See how we get on. Oh yeah, there's a fair few valves in there, might as well get through those. So I'm just balancing the Duratec crankshaft first. I've got the data into the balancer, So I'm going to give it a run first. I'm going to put the camera up here. I don't know if I can get it all in shot. There we go. So I haven't run this yet. I'm bringing the revs down to 800. So, I mean, that's running the crankshaft first go, and it's completely in balance. So we don't need to do anything to that, apart from quickly change the settings on the machine. So we're now going to read from the outer point, so front pulley and the flywheel, and we'll see if that's out of balance. So I've just got to adjust the machine a little bit because the crank's just trying to move off on this front end. I think it's the weight of the flywheel that's causing that. But also, where I've not washed the flywheel first, it's splattered oil everywhere. Which has annoyed me. I'm going to let it run again just to settle. And there we go, the front pulley's in and the flywheel's out. So I'm just going to bring the flywheel in and then we'll put the clutch on. So I've made one small adjustment on the flywheel and that's brought that into spec now. Let it run again. So what I'm going to do now is get the clutch, I'm going to bolt the clutch on and then we'll see where we're at with that. So this is the clutch that my customer's supplied. It's meant to be a heavy duty one. So let's see how good it is standard. Right, so let's see what that's like. You can see everything's green at the minute, that means it's in balance. So it's 46 grams out at the moment, which is about right for a clutch, to be honest. So hurry up. Right, I've put one hole in it just to see how much that brings it down by. So that's 40 down by 12 grams, I think. 14 grams. So that's brought it down a big chunk, but it's also moved now. Hopefully that's going to get us absolutely bang on. See what that does. Taken a little bit too much off it because it's gone the opposite side, but it's within balance now. So we're going to leave that there. Print a working copy for my customer, and then tomorrow I need to just polish the crank, then we're going to get it built. So I'll see you tomorrow. So the crank's been through the wash and I'm sticking the new bearings in. I'm fitting ACL race bearings into this on the main bearing and the big end. So what I'm doing is I'm just washing off it has like an oil layer or a protective layer or grease layer on them when you take them out of the pack. So I'm just wiping all that off now, getting them in, engine build lube, and then we're going to drop the crank in, get the crank cradle in, torque it all up, spin it over, and we're going to put the new pistons in. So the crank's in the engine. I've nipped down the cradle with the new with the new bolts and the ACL bearings. Next thing I've got to do is just torque the new bolts up. So what I needed to do actually is take one of the bolts out and measure it, because there's two different torque wrench settings depending on the length of the bolt. So I need to just double check that. So I'm hoping this is 110 mil, because that's the size I wrote down. And it is, it's 110 mil, so that's good. So the torque wrench setting is 45 Newton meters plus 180 degrees. So the good thing with this snap-on torque wrench is it's multi-ranging. It tells you all the different like Newton meters, foot pounds and things like that, and it also does degrees. So 45 is the first setting, but what I'm going to do is I don't want to go straight to that, so I'm going to go to 35 first. It also beeps, vibrates, and then tells you that you've got the right torque with the traffic light system on it. So if you're working like above your head, it's good because you can see the colour change and feel it through the vibration. There we go, I went a little bit too far on that because it went red, but it doesn't matter so much because we're not at the right torque anyway. And then what I'm also going to do before I do go to the first stage is just always make sure that we've got the crank turning good. I'm not pulling on the torque wrench too hard, I'm bringing it up nice and steady. Now once we've done this last one, I can also check that I've done enough, because there's a counter in the corner, so it says 10. There's 10 main bearing bolts, so we know that we've done them all. And then there's a gyroscope in here, so this can't be touched while we change it over to read in degrees. So what I'm going to do, instead of just going straight round to 180 degrees, I'm going to go 2 sets of 90. Just so I know that I'm pulling the bolts evenly. The good thing about this gyroscope is it's also got a memory in it, so you can ratchet it. There we go, it still turns really nice. So one more set of 90s. There we go, still turns really nice that. So I'm going to flip it over and then we're going to prep for putting the pistons in. And then Mark has supplied some brand new Ford pistons and conrods, or Mazda pistons and conrods. We're also changing the standard bolt to an ARP big end bolt, which is a lot stronger. These are called an ARP 2000. So what I've got to do now is just make sure these are all good, make sure these bolts clear the head, make sure the radius is perfect and the cap and everything. I'm going to de-ring these because what I want to do is just make sure the ring gap is right as well. I don't want to assume that these are correct. And then we'll get rid of the standard bearings, we're going to stick it on some ACLs and we'll get this bit torqued back together. The other thing that I've done is we've got a new oil pump for it, but I've loaded it with build lube, because what will happen if you fit an oil pump dry, it won't pick up vacuum because the gears are just meshing together. It takes ages for it to get oil pressure in. But now it's got build lube around it, straight away I can feel resistance. You can hear it making pressure, or trying to make pressure, and actually suck as well. So that's one good tip to do, is always just pre-lube up the oil pump. Then the other thing that we've had to do, I'll just go and get it out of his box of bits. So when I was checking the parts that we've got, I don't know if it's picking it up, but this is the oil pump gear and all of the teeth have gone. I don't know if you can see, but they're all rounded off. So they're good at the top there, but they're rounded off. So this 100% needed replacing. Luckily, because we had to get another block for this, he had another oil pump gear which is immaculate, so I've just put that through the cleaner now to get all the old oil off and make sure it's nice and clean. I'm doing the second ring first in the bore. I've made sure it sits nice and square. What I'm after is about 18 thousandths of an inch, which, look at that, that's 18 thou, and it's straight in, it's holding the ring nice, holding the feeler gauge nice, so that's that good. And then the top ring, I want that to be a bit tighter. I want to run this at about 12 thou. I don't know, that looks a bit tight. I'm going to try it at 12, we might be bang on. Yeah, that is 12 actually. In fact, it's probably 13, so yeah, 13 thou, so that's brilliant. So I'm going to check the rest and give it a clean. We'll just wipe it through. I'm going to use some of my Total Seal lube in the bores just to help the ring and the skirt. But what I'll do is I'll quickly measure the rest and then I'll film the pistons and rods going in. The other thing that I thought I would show is the second ring actually has to go in one way. It's got a tiny little step there called a Napier ring, so that scrapes down, so that scrapes the oil into the oil control ring. So whenever you do look at them, make sure you always put the rings in the right way. It's pretty important. And the top ring, let me just double check. No, that can go in any way because that's just a barrel faced ring, so that's fine. So yeah, that's fine. So that's all the rings checked now, and what I'm doing is I'm just putting a tiny little bit of the Total Seal assembly lube for the bores, just around the top part of the bores. I'm just putting a little bit on my finger and then just smidging it round. And then also, because I've got these ARP ring compressors for this size bore, I don't need to use a conventional piston ring compressor. So I'm just putting a bit in there just to help the rings slip through there. And then these rods, when they come through, they're not marked. So what I've done is I've put a little one on the cap and on the rod, because these rods are not machined flat, they're cracked in half. So it's really, really important, if you're ever stripping one of these and rebuilding it, that you do it one cylinder at a time, and you take the cap off, remove the piston and rod, and then bolt the cap back on, and then make some marks so you know where they go. Because here's a prime example. If I take this apart, you can actually see that it's broke across there. Now, if I put that together like that, and if I torqued it up, you wouldn't see that parting line at all. It would be perfect. But if you was to try and get that side on, you can see straight away there's a massive gap. So your engine would last seconds if you was to try and bolt it together like that and not notice it and fit it in the car. So my advice is one cylinder at a time, and yeah, get it apart, mark it, and then you'll know how it goes back together. So next thing is to fit these pistons and torque it up. Oh, the other thing that I will show you is with the ARPs. So that's the ARP bolt. You want to make sure that it goes through the rod and that it sits really good on the cap, that the radius on the bolt goes into the cap perfectly, because what you don't want is that radius causing a problem and making the bolt sit off the cap like that, which it can do. I've seen it before. And then also you need to make sure that the thread threads all the way into the rod. So with that, you can just screw that in just to make sure that it does. I've already done these actually, so we are good on that, but I thought I'd just show you that. So I'm going to fit number 1 and number 4. What I've done is, when I've fitted the piston rings back on, the 2 compression rings, so the top ring and the second ring, they're level with the gudgeon pins, so they're away 90 degrees from the thrust sides of the piston. The oil control ring, I've got that staggered as well, but it's really important that the top ring and the second ring isn't on the thrust side. And then with this, I'm just going to fit this into this ring compressor, make sure the rings are pushed in nicely, and then with your fingers just push it all the way over like that, and then hand at the bottom just so I can feel against the crank, because what you don't want is the rod hitting the crank journal, because it will mark it, which will cause the bearing to wear quite quick, and we definitely don't want that. So once again, there's an arrow on the top which is forward. The wing, just double checking that the rings are staggered. They are. I did that. Once again, nice and flush against the block, push it home. There we go. So the next thing I'm going to do is torque up them 2 one at a time before I fit 2 and 3. And then, because I've made those marks, I can see straight away the mark on the cap. So, and the mark on the rod, so we can make sure that they go together perfectly. And then with the ARP bolts, there is a procedure for doing these. The first thing we've got to do is make sure the bottom, or behind the head, underneath the head of the bolt, has got ARP lube on, and also the thread, because we don't want the 2 dry bits of metal pulling against each other. And then the correct way to do the rod bolts is to stretch them. If you haven't got a stretch gauge, ARP know roughly that at a certain stretch it's a certain foot-pound of torque as well. So if you haven't got a stretch gauge, it's no problem. It does also come with a torque wrench setting. So this is my ARP stretch gauge. I'll just put that down. First thing I do is just wind the big end bolts down. And what I'm going to check for in a sec is to just make sure that the cap looks like it's together perfectly, so there's no gaps in the parting line of the cap and the rod. You don't have this problem with steel caps because they're machined flat and then bored through. So I'm just turning the engine over each way to look at the parting line, and yeah, it's really good. So what I'm going to do now is, I don't want any preload on the cap, so I'm backing it off and then just doing it so I can just feel it bite the cap, like that. And these ARPs, they need to stretch 0.6 of an inch. So I'm going to fit my stretch gauge. I will show you on the bolt as well. So on the bolt, there's a part machined there and at the bottom. So the stretch gauge has got two parts to it, 2 points to it that sit perfect in that. So what I've done is, the stretch gauge is on that. I'm going to zero it. And then I'm also going to check number 4. So I need to remember that that's 2 thou different. And then if I show you one of these spare bolts, so that's actually reading 2 thou different as well. So what we've got to do is stretch this to 6 thou. So how I do it, once I've got that sorted like that, move it back to TDC. The stretch gauge is quite difficult to get in these because it's a cradle. I'm going to use my torque wrench. And ARP think that at 6 thou it's 45 foot-pound. So I'm going to set my torque wrench to 45. Then real evenly just bring them up. That's 18. So once again, I'm not going straight to 45. But what I am going to do is I'm going to bring it to 40, because I don't doubt ARP. I've never really known them to be wrong on their stretch. So there's 40 on that one. 40 on that one. 40 on that one. And the same again. So I'm going to move that crank back round there, get my stretch gauge. And there we go, that's 5.5 thou. This one was already 2 thou different. Yeah, so I would guess their 45 thou is about bang on, because we need to just stretch it a tiny little bit more. So I'm going to go now to the 45 that they have recommended anyway. And there we go, exactly 6 thou. So once again, ARP have got their setting perfect. Right, we're going to now turn it around. So 1 and 4 are at TDC and 2 and 3 are at the bottom. Flick the engine round and we'll get them two fitted too. So that's the oil pump, and brand new oil pump and the brand new strainer on. I've torqued that up. I haven't put this bolt in yet. I'm just going to wait for that for the time being. So I've just put the front crankshaft gear in the wash. While that's doing, I'm going to reface the valves. So we're moving over to the Comec machine now, which is a machine that I always use for facing valves. I've got this in the quick way, but the Comec is the one that I seem to use more than anything else. So I've already refaced, or sorry, I've already shot blasted all of the valves. Just go get them. So these are the valves out of the shot blaster. I've only done the head and the back just to clean the carbon off. They're the exhaust and they're the inlet. I've then polished the stems and also measured the stem to make sure they're all right. So I'm going to start with the inlet valves. I'm just going to double check that my machine is on 45 degrees. Switch the machine on. And then I need to set the machine up so it's at the right depth. Which it's already about right. So I need the coolant to come through because I don't want to burn the stone and get chatter on the valve face. I think the water might be a bit low. There we are. So what I'm doing is bringing the valve head in, move the coolant back a little bit, and then what I'm watching the face of the valve. And nice and steady, keeping the valve moving on the wheel. And then when I can see it's all the way over, back it off. And then that leaves an absolute perfect finish. No chatter, just a real nice grounding valve. Right, I'm going to carry on with them, and after that we're going to grind the valves in and reface the cylinder head, so I'll show that process. This is the cylinder head now out of the wash. It's been through the Ultrasonic. That's done a good job, and I'm pleased with that purchase. So the Ultrasonic is a good one. I've actually just had it through the hot wash as well, to get just the bits out of it what the Ultrasonic didn't remove. So what I'm going to do now is grind the valves in. I've refaced them. I use this Clover carborundum paste, which I find that to be the best. And then I've got different valve grinding in sticks. So I'm starting with the inlet valves. And it doesn't need a lot. I see a few videos where the valve is real bulked up with carborundum, but it doesn't need a lot. It just needs a nice neat little line all the way round, like that. So this is just a cheap wood with a sucker on the end of it. And I've already taken the stem seals off this, but what I do is I always put a little bit of brake cleaner or WD on the seat, and it helps the carburetor break down. And then what you're listening for is the sound. So when you can hear the carburetor paste break down and then all of a sudden pick a bit more up, that's normally like that. That is normally the seat ground in perfectly. And what we're looking for is the shiny line from the grinder, like that. We're looking for that now to be a nice grey line, like that. So if I grab the two, you should be able to see the difference. And what we want is that grey line to be continuous all the way round. That way we know that we've ground the valve correctly, which it is. And then once we've cleaned the carburetor off the seat, we're looking for the same nice grey line all the way around. Now what will happen is if for any reason there is a shiny bit or a dark or a brown bit where it's burnt in that seat, that means the seats need cutting. I've got to recut the seat to get them perfect. But this engine had no problem with the valve seat or anything like that, so I'm going to try and grind them in first, just because it's quicker, and I don't think it needs the seats cut, because when we cut the seat it also changes massively the valve clearance. We're putting a set of modified cams in this, so the valve clearances aren't going to be the same, but what I don't want to do is cause myself way too much work and have to adjust the top of the valve. So I'm going to try and grind them all in, which I think they're going to grind in nice because the seats look like they're in really good condition. And then what I do with the Sharpie is just write what number it's out of just on the valve, because now that valve is ground to that seat, we want to keep them together. Right, I'm going to carry on and do that. Once they're done, we'll reface the cylinder head. So you don't need to watch me do another 14 of them. So next thing you're going to see is the head getting refaced. So the last operation on the head before putting it through the cleaner one more time and building it is to give it a reface. So I've set it all up. It's definitely had a skim before. It doesn't look like it's had much off it, but there is also some track marks where it looks like the head gasket was either gone or starting to go. So first thing I'm going to do is just make sure that the cutter isn't touching the cylinder head straight away. Get it turned on, bring it down a few down. So I'm going to stick the machine on automatic feed. I'm going to put some penetrant on it just to protect the diamond a little bit on the slow cut. What that also does is if there's any like loose burrs or corrosion in the aluminium, what can happen is the cutter can lift or pick up on that, and then it just doesn't leave as nice a finish. So we're going to give it a good coat of penetrant. And then auto feed. There we go. A lovely finish, nice. It looks like a mirror. So what I'm going to do now is just deburr in the combustion chamber and then deburr around the outside of the cylinder head. And to do that, all I use is an old piston ring. So I'll switch the skimmer off and then just carefully go around the combustion chamber, get rid of anything that can cause any hot spots. Now what I've just got to do with this now is give it a blow off to get the swarf off it. I'm going to get it in the cleaner and then we'll also jet wash it to make sure we can get down all the oil ways, through all the waterways to try and get as much of the swarf out, or all the swarf out. And then a new set of stem seals on it, we'll pop the valves in it and then that can go straight on top of the engine. So the oil pump chain's now on with the tensioner and the guide rail. Next thing for me to do is to silicone up the sump, and we're going to bolt this down. Now the sump doesn't use a gasket, it uses RTV. So we're going to do a nice bead all the way around here. I don't like it when it's really clunky, because as you tighten the sump up, the silicone then just comes out the side and it dangles inside the sump as well, and then bits of this can fall off and get caught in the strainer. So we're going to do a nice little bead all the way around here. So that's the sump now on, and I'll show you this silicone bead. So what I always try and get to, so I know that it's not splodged out everywhere, is this real neat bead all the way around the sump, all pretty uniform and the same. So I'm quite happy with that. It looks good. It's all the way around here, it goes underneath there, along there. And then you can just see it splodges out the back on the rear seal. And then there's nothing to come out. And then there's nothing to come out the front, because we've got to put the front cover on that once we've done the timing. So one thing that's quite important is just to make sure that the sump hasn't got a big step here, because once again this front plate is siliconed on too, and the silicone can only fill so much. So as you're nipping it up, I just run my finger along there just to make sure, and then with a dead blow hammer just tap it one way or the other. So apart from putting a new sump bung in it, it's now ready to turn over. We can drop the head in. I'll put the valves in the cylinder head. So I'm going to turn this over now, because I'll put the sump bung in it as I'm getting it on the trolley and getting the the flywheel and clutch on. I need to flick this over and get it on TDC number 1, and then what I'm going to do is, once I've got it on TDC number 1, I'm then going to back it a little bit, because I'm going to set the valve clearances once the head is torqued down. So the next thing to go on is the cylinder head, and all the valves are in order, they've been ground in. I've got the gasket on, I've got the 2 dowels in. So what I do is I just look down one of the stud holes and line up the threaded hole in the block, so I can kind of get it on straight away without jiggling it around and scratching the head face up. So that's that on. I need to go and get the head bolts now, torque this down, and then we're going to set the tappets. So this is the first stage of getting the cylinder head torqued down. Once again, these are stretch bolts, so they have to will be brought down in degrees. So I'm bringing this next stage down nice and even. This is 45 Newton meters. And because the next one is degrees, what I'm going to do is once I've got all these torqued, I'm just going to put the slightest little bit of pressure back throughout all 10 of them, just to make sure that they're all still bang on 45. I would have guessed the centre ones will have moved slightly when all the rest of them have been torqued down, so that's why I'm going to double check. Right, here we go, let's see. There you go, that's how much it's moved. And as I come to the outside of all the bolts, it will just be, they would have moved less. There we go, the outer ones just haven't moved at all. Well, that one has a little bit. That one hasn't. And then because I've been around them twice, my torque wrench should say 20, yeah, which it does. So now I'm going to do the degrees. So I've got to keep the torque wrench still while it's setting the gyroscope. That's the first 90. And then I think there's one more 90 after this, but I'm just going to go and check my paperwork to make sure. And then what I do on this last 90 is the torque wrench, when it reaches the 90 degrees, it also flashes up how many Newton meters that is. And what I do is I always keep an eye on that, so I know that all the bolts have roughly torqued up to the same as well as been stretched to the same. So that's 138 Newton meters. $140 Newton meters. Same again, 140. Yeah, all about 138 to 140 newton meters, so I'm happy with that. And then his engine originally come with the 16 cam buckets in it, so I'll measure them first. In fact, I need to go and wash these as well because it's got its protective coating on. I'll show you these buckets. So normally in cylinder heads you either have a hydraulic cam follower or a mechanical. Mechanical you can get, so the hydraulic, basically what that is you don't have to set the clearances with that. It just uses the oil pressure to fill the hydraulic follower with oil and it just takes the lash out. And what that is supposed to do is just keep the engine very quiet because there's no gap there. It's just relying on the oil. They're no good for high revs, but the Duratecs, they deal with that straight away because there's no hydraulic followers in a Duratec. Instead they use buckets. Now you can get different sorts of buckets. You can get a biscuit shim that clips into the top of the bucket so you can remove it, measure it, adjust the valve clearance on the biscuit shim. You get under shim buckets as well. So basically it's just a standard one size bucket and you have a shim that goes underneath. They're better than the biscuit ones because you can use a wider surface area on the bucket. So if you're going for a high lift cam, you've got more surface area for the cam to swipe against. So and also the under shim is there's not really much chance of it tipping and flicking out. These are the best because there is nothing mechanical to change. It's just a shim. So every single one of these is a different size. So when I'm setting the tappets, what I'll do is I'll measure all of them and then with a Sharpie just write on them what size they are. And then I'll just stick 8 random ones in one side, measure the shims, and then I say if the exhaust is 10 thou and it's got one of these in it which is say 120 thou thick, but this clearance is 12 thou, I need to then put a 2 thou bigger bucket in there. Well, because I've already measured them and made a note of them, I'll know if I can adjust them with what my customer's already got. If not, then I'll keep about 30 or 40 of them in stock, all different sizes, so we can just jiggle them around and get the valve clearance right. So I'm going to go and wash the cams first, and then I'm going to go and get a little bit of data for these cams for the valve clearances. So what I'm doing now is setting the valve clearances, and I thought I would show you exactly what I was talking about earlier. So I set out on my engine build spec sheet, inlet, exhaust, the valve clearance is a reminder, and then I write the first side that I'm doing, I write the shim sizes that I've fitted. It doesn't matter what you put in there because this is the first initial like roughing out almost. So as long as I've got a size of shim and the tappet clearance, that's fine. Then on the other 8 shims, I have then wrote the size on them shims in Sharpie. That way, if I need to make a small adjustment by a couple of thou, 5 thou, whatever, I can have a look to see what size is in it, what size I've got throughout the rest of the cylinders or valves, and what size I've got spare to see if I can jiggle them around and make it work. And then also the spare shims that I've got, the spare shims that I've got are all written on as well. So let me just this. Yeah, so the spare shims that I've got are also written on. Now, I do one side at a time. I back the pistons away from TDC so there's no chance of any valve contact. Once I've done this side, I then loosen that off and then work on this side. Now, when you're pulling these cams down, this material that the camshafts are made of is chill cast. So if I was to put this cam in and two of the cam lobes was trying to open the valves, and I just wound like one cap in, there's probably a 90% chance that you will fracture the cam. And a lot of the time you can fracture it enough where the cam will still turn, but eventually it's going to break and cause you a problem. So when you pull these cams down, you have got to be really, really careful with it. Pull them down evenly, don't just work on them two and then them, just like bring them all down pretty smooth. I've already torqued these up. Now, how do I know this? Because I've broke cams. I've broken a couple of cams before actually on different engines where I was trying to speed things up and yeah, made a mistake, and it cost me time and money. So yeah, that's real world experience there. So the next thing is I'm gonna turn the cam from this hexagon that's machined onto the cam. So I'm gonna get a spanner so I can turn it from the cam and not have to try and turn it from the front. Doesn't matter, I just find it quite easy that way. Now, I'm not saying this is the right way to do this. This is my way, what I find very fast. It works for me. I know where I'm going with it. I can rough them out, see what I've got, jiggle them around. The only time this becomes a real big problem is if I haven't got the cam buckets and then I've got to take the cylinder head back off because I'll have to take a valve out and adjust it either on the seat or on the stem, which can be a nightmare. So fingers crossed, I've not had one yet, but this could be one that causes me a problem, I guess. So also, because the cylinder head casting is higher up in these centre parts than the buckets, because the valve clearance on this is 8 thou, yeah, 8 thou is still a bendy feeler gauge, but it comes in at a way where it can dig in. So we use a bent style feeler gauge for these, which is like that. So it's got an offset, so you can get it in nice and straight. I have my normal ones here as well, because these ones start at 6 thou. These ones start at 1.5 thou. So a lot of the time, if a 6 thou won't go in, I can use the smaller ones on these to bend it round, because the smaller one will be quite nice. So I just got to find the right size spanner for the cam, which is that one. And then I always go in direction of rotation. And I always go round a complete turn just so it's pushed the valve open and closed it. When the valves are set correctly, you can actually feel the spring kind of flick and try and turn the cam. I know these are out, I can feel that these are out because I'm not getting that clunk, clunk, clunk. So on these feeler gauges, I only need to open the first few because once I get to 6 thou, these ones take over. And then I need to bring my paperwork a bit closer, so I'm going to keep walking backwards and forwards. So I'm going to start with the 6 thou because it's the smallest one. And then I quickly just bring them up one at a time. So the 11th thou fits, the 12th thou doesn't. So that number 8 is 11th thou. So the 21 thou doesn't, so that's 20 thou. You turn it over to the next cylinder to test, which would be number 2. And then once again, we're going to start at 6. 6 doesn't fit on that one, but it does on that one, so I'll quickly do this. 7 fits, 8 doesn't. So 7 thou. Now, because the 6 don't fit on that number 4, we're going to have to use the thinner feeler gauges. So I'm going to start at 5 and work my way backwards. Oops, 5. 5 does, so 6 doesn't. 6. And that one's 9. So that's the tappet set on this side. I needed 2 goes to get it right, basically. So we've got 9 thou, 8 thou, 8 thou, 9 thou, 8 thou. I mean, I'm really happy with 1 thou. That's no problem at all. So what I'm going to do now is I've just torqued these up to 12 Newton meters. So I'm just going to put my little paint pen mark to know that I've torqued them all up. I'm going to put some lube across them as well to protect them. I don't put this on as I'm setting the tappet because it makes it pretty difficult to get a good feel when it's covered in this build assembly oil lube. Turning it over so I can get some more on it, but what I'm going to do is there's a groove in the back of these cams. So that's both tappets now set. This one was all over the place actually, but yeah, managed to get it right first go. So I did make a mistake earlier. I paint pen this because I'd final torqued it, but forgot that I hadn't done this side, and so I've had to undo that to back the cams to close the valve so we didn't get any contact there. So this needs torquing up and this needs torquing up. So the next thing to do is to start to prep to do my cam timing, so I'll film that too in a sec. So the last thing for me to do is check the cam timing. Well, I say the last thing, it isn't. I've still got to put the flywheel, the clutch and the rocker cover on, but the tricky thing is to set the cam timing. These verniers are you don't actually need verniers on Duratec cams because they're fully floating anyway. However, it does make it easier because you can just move it a little bit on the vernier keys. If you undo that and it moves a lot, then it might be a bit trickier, I guess, where it can't spin too far because it would lock out on the Allen key bolts. So I've already set this up how we set the Duratecs for the other race cars up, where it's fully floating. So I preset what I want to do the cams to, get it on TDC, and then just double check it. So I know I'm going to be pretty close, but I thought I would just show where we need to be at. So I'm going to turn the engine over. This gauge here has been zeroed. What I'm doing is I'm measuring the cam timing at lift at TDC. So when cylinder number 1 or 4 is at TDC, I want to know how much the inlet and the exhaust valve is open by. So the first one I'm watching is this one, because when it comes on to TDC, the inlet valve is opening and the exhaust valve is closing. So what I want to do first of all is watch my gauge, this gauge, because I want to know exactly when I come on to TDC. I have zeroed it, which is there. I'm going to keep the pressure on it because if I let go of the ratchet, it will come off TDC slightly, so I won't get a true reading. So I want to keep it, because as this engine's firing, there'll always be load on the crank. So basically, at TDC, I'm at 0.85 on the inlet. So what I want to do now is zero this gauge, and then I'm going to continue past TDC, so the piston's going down. And then as soon as this gauge stops reading, which is there, that's my reading. Now, this gauge is in imperial, not metric, but if I get a calculator, we've got 35 thou of lift at TDC. So 0.035 times it by 25.4 and it's 0.88. The cam timing for these cams, the manufacturer recommends 0.85 on the inlet and 0.85 on the exhaust. Let me just double check that, because I wrote it all down earlier off the website. Yeah, 0.85, 0.85. So the inlet is absolutely bang on, and the exhaust just needs bringing back a little bit. Or just, I say bringing back, bringing forwards a little bit, I guess, just taking some exhaust out of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way back round and I'm going to get it back onto TDC, which is there, because the last thing that I need to do is down the bottom. Oh, you can see it anyway, I don't need to adjust that. So down the bottom, the crankshaft position sensor, which bolts here, we need to basically make sure that this, because this is the trigger wheel, this needs to be in the correct position. So there's a hole here, and then there's a thread in this cover. And what I want to do is just make sure that I can screw that in there like that. So that's all back, pardon me, that's all bang on. So I'm going to make a slight adjustment to that. I'm going to check all the bolts are tight. I've checked the vernier bolts are tight. I need to just double check the cam pulley bolts are tight. We need to tighten up the crankshaft pulley, and then we're there with this. So the last thing we're doing on Mark and Kelly's engine before I finish off showing you around it is he's brought his injectors up as well, and we always like to run them just to make sure that they're flowing correctly. So I'm going to keep the camera rolling while I do it. Tracy will probably edit some boring bits out, but I thought if I film all of it, you will see all of it. And then I've got to put in some information into this. The last set we did with GDI, so I need to take it off GDI and put it into standard port. I'm then going to back some pressure out of it because it will have way too much pressure for these injectors. 4 injectors, flow time 30 seconds. So the first thing it's going to do is prime the injector to get all the air out the fuel rail and through the injector. The next test is to make sure none of the needles and seats are leaking. So this is basically running the pump. So this gives me chance also to set the pressure. It's running the pump, but it's not firing the injector. So what this checks is the needle and the seat. But there's no droplets from this, so they're not leaking. The next test is the impedance of the injector. So this lets us know if any of the solenoids are starting to fail. But these are all pretty accurate. And then the next test is our flow test, which is at 1,666 revs per minute. So what I do is just flow them. I have a good look at the spray pattern because I can see it now. And then I flow test them into the test tubes. This is a 30-second test. And as you can see, they're pretty even. This one is 58, 57, 57, 57. So these injectors are really good. I'm going to run them through the ultrasonic anyway, and then I'll retest them. So the next thing that I'm going to do before I do that is I just want to make sure the injectors are good at different RPMs. And what I'll do is I'll keep changing the pressure to see if we can actually get them to fail. So I'm going to bring it back down now to our normal test setting. So while I've got them this far down, I'm also going to put new filters in for Mark and Kelly. And to get the filters out, they're quite tricky actually, but when you buy one of these kits, you can also get the fitting kit as well. So all you do with this is you just screw the top of the injector onto this and then press that, and it will just ease out the filter. And all it is just a plastic gauze in there. So we changed these because, especially with the modern fuel, it can eat this away and cause it to break up. If that breaks up and goes through the injector, they're finished. You can never really get them that clean again. Well, if they've been in there for a long time, especially. There's the next one out. That one's actually broke up, look. So it's a good job we're replacing these. So I'm going to put the injectors into the ultrasonic now. Just make sure there's no test fluid in them. So they're going to clean for 10 minutes. I'll then come back upstairs, put new filters in them and retest them. But while that's cleaning, I'm going to go and stick the rocker cover on. So that's my 2 litre Duratec done for the Fiesta ST. This is for my customer Mark and his sister Kelly. I really like it actually. The red with the black rocker cover looks pretty cool. Mark actually supplied most of the engine bits for this, minus the gasket set and the bearings. The first engine, which you saw at the beginning of the video, was at 0.25, so, and it was quite big at 0.25 as well, so we didn't run that. His friend brought down this donor block. When we stripped it, it was immaculate. There's a couple of little marks in the board, but we've ran them, to be honest. They're not too bad. I think they'll be fine. Well, they will be fine. So Mark supplied brand new pistons and rods from Ford, loads of bits and bobs, cams from Newman, the timing chain kit, a set of plugs. We put the plugs in, but I haven't done them tight because he's going to have to get the oil pressure up. New oil pump, new strainer. So yeah, he's going to have to take the plugs out, get the oil pressure up, fit the plugs. All I've got to do is, when it comes off the stand, is bolt the flywheel and clutch on it. I've gone through his injectors, which was perfect, but I've clipped them back into the rail for him. And I think I might even fit the oil filter housing and that, but I'll do that tomorrow because it's Sunday and I want to go home. But yeah, that's it, it's all done. The bottom end's fully balanced, as you see on the video, but it was pretty good. It was only the clutch that was out. So yeah, I just need Sam to come back now. He's at racing. We was going to race today, but lack of funds and time has made us not go racing. So I wanted to get this done and Sam's gone there. So when Sam gets back, we can lift it off the stand, talk the rest of the bits up, but no, that's done. So hopefully we'll get a video of this running once Mark's got it in his sister's car and it's all back up and running. But yeah, all good. Catch you later. See ya.